Welcome to the Prepper Report, the first show in the world to deal specifically with the aspects of preparedness, emergency preparedness. I'm Josh Wander, and I have here in the studio today Andy DeLynn. Andy?
Hi, Josh.
You have such a resume, I don't think I would be able myself to go through all the things you've done in your life, so maybe you give us a quick intro about what you're all about.
I'm glad to be here with you today, Josh. I've always been very community-minded. Started the Squirrel Hill Citizens Patrol in Squirrel Hill, Pennsylvania, right actually in the city of Pittsburgh, and past president of the Rotary Club of Pittsburgh, and retired Navy, and Republican Leadership Council, and on and on and on. So, but it's always very important to be prepared, and I think it's important to talk about it and make sure people understand it. I have a 44-year record now in amateur radio, and we always believe in emergency communications and preparedness in that area as well. So hope we can bring all that together and get people ready for hopefully something they'll never need to use.
Well, thanks, Andy. I think that's, like I said, you have an amazing background, and I think that you'll be an incredible asset for the show. The first thing I think we need to speak about is why prepare? I mean, people out there are thinking, you know, maybe this is something that crazy people out in Montana that are wearing khaki or anarchists, anti-government types are the ones that are out there preparing for some sort of apocalypse in the future. But I think as the years go by and people realize that how important it is for just your average person to have some sort of preparedness, even the federal government is recommending that everybody has a 72-hour bag, something prepared, you know, food, water, basic necessities for their family. So I guess, you know, people have insurance, right? Mm-hmm. And that's just a matter of, you know, just for risk. I mean, people don't want to take the risk. So what do you think? If you were to speak to somebody, you know, an average person on the street, and you would speak about preparedness, why would you try to, you know, what would convince them to prepare?
Well, there's many reasons to prepare, and we're not always thinking. We think in terms of, we talk about the preppers and we talk about being prepared for the ultimate disaster, but that's something that we hope never will happen. But there's something that we know happens all the time, and that is, for example, right now power was lost in a multi-state area around Washington, D.C. The people that were prepared for that had the generators. My sister lives in that area. She had a generator. She ran a refrigerator with it. She was prepared. She had canned food. She had, you know, other items, water. She had bottled water that she had just in case for things like this. And these things do happen every day on a regular basis, and this is something you have to be prepared for. It's not a crazy thing. It's just a natural thing that everybody should have in their house, that ability to stay prepared for just the general acts of God that happen to you on a regular basis. Now, if the balloon goes up and you have to, you know, really go all the way, that's where you come in.
Well, that's a good point that you just made, that preparedness is about personal responsibility. And people anyone that understands that you don't want to delegate, you know, such an important part of life as survival, you know, the most basic fundamental part of life, to delegate that to someone else, whether it be a government official or whether it be some sort of emergency preparedness organization like the Red Cross. You know, you can't always depend on somebody else when it comes to such a fundamental aspect of living. So, you know, just having the basics in your home is really worthwhile. In the preparedness world, you know, in the prepper community, we discuss the rule of threes. The rule of threes works like this. The most basic thing that you need to survive, and you cannot survive more than 3 minutes without, would be air, right? You need oxygen in order to survive. Right. And that's the first thing you need to prepare with is oxygen. And we'll go through some different items during the show, then we'll discuss a few different ideas of what you should be storing. But air is the most basic thing that everybody needs in order to survive. Right. The next rule of three is would be water. And that would be, you can't survive without water for more than 3 days, right, you know, most climates. So, you know, air, water, and then finally 3 days, and then 3 weeks, you need to have food. You know, you can't survive without 3 weeks without food. So all these things are important. You need shelter, you need water, you need food, you need air, obviously. So let's just you have any comments, or do you want to go on to
No,
some
I
of the
think
things?
it's fine. There's nothing, you know.
We have some things that we brought into the studio here, just some basic items to describe some of the rule of threes and different things that you might want to have on hand. Some of them, obviously, each one of these concepts, you may have something that's more out there, more advanced, or you may have some basic things, but there's no reason why everybody shouldn't have the bare minimum.
Sure.
So the first thing that we discussed was air, right? Everybody needs air. So obviously we have air all around us. What do we need air for? So, air pollution is a concern. If there was a nuclear fallout situation, something happened, we have, the Beaver nuclear facility not so far from us. If something, God forbid, would happen to that nuclear facility, there would be a meltdown. We saw what happened in Japan.
Sure.
Air is very important, and being prepared in that way is critical. Some basic things, and this also fits into the N1H1. If you're going to have some sort of airborne disease, having these kind of masks, these are N95 masks, having some kind of mask like that along, just to have, for you and your family.
And they're relatively inexpensive. I mean, you can have these
cheap.
in your house, and it doesn't impact your budget at all. It's
Right.
just good to have around.
It's light. It's small. Everybody could have a box of these in their house just in case. Again, getting into more advanced things, you could have a gas mask.
Right.
This is actually a very, very cheap option. There are gas masks that go from anywhere from $10, $15, which is probably one of these from Finland, up into the hundreds of dollars for the Israeli kind. But a gas mask is obviously a higher level of preparedness.
How would they work around a beard? They seal pretty well?
Actually, they don't. They have, I know in Israel, having gone through the Gulf War in Israel, they have special masks that are for beards. They go around the beard and pump air into it.
Yeah,
this you cannot have any facial hair or any beard because it won't seal properly.
Yeah.
So the next thing was water. So basic water is something that everybody needs, and we cannot survive more than a couple days without. So one of the ideas for water, and we're very fortunate here in Pittsburgh, we have 3 rivers. We have plenty of water.
Right.
The problem is that water is usually polluted, and you can't drink it. So there are different filtration systems. These are very simple ones. Here's a little, this over here is a straw. You can actually walk down to the river, put the straw in and suck it right out. And
Have you tried that?
I have not, actually. Thanks for asking. Again, it says the perfect addition to your 72-hour emergency kit. You don't want to do it. This only filters up to like 20 gallons, so this is not a permanent solution. There are obviously larger filters out there, but this is something very light, simple. You can have it in a bag.
20 gallons, I mean, as an individual, if you just keep sipping it as you need it, not sit there and drink a lot.
Right. Well, they talk about having 1 gallon per person per day of water.
That's during an emergency or normally?
Normally. Normally we're in an emergency.
But in an emergency, you'd probably take less.
You could, again,
it depends.
Right, and it depends on the environment, what season it's happening in, if it's going to be.
So you could figure that'll last you about a month if you do it right. Could.
For one person, it could.
Yeah, for one person. So
and you know what? It says 20 gallons. I bet you can go a little bit over the 20 gallons.
Probably.
But
at least tolerable. It probably wouldn't be the best thing to do. But
some other things are the pills that you can buy. These are tablets that you buy that purify water, and you can just drop them in. You read the instructions. You can get these in any camping store, and that will purify the water. You can use. There are ways of using iodine and bleach. I'd recommend investigating that thoroughly before you would do that, because they could be poisonous. But you could use these pills. Here's an interesting gadget which they have, which is called the water bob. The water bob actually fills up your bathtub. You throw this. It's a piece of plastic, very light. Right? You throw it in your bathtub, and as soon as you hear that there's an emergency that's going to happen, I grew up in a place where they had a parasite in the water, and for a few months we couldn't drink the water. We had to just boil the water or buy purified water. If you hear that something's going to happen, or there's going to be big storms, or something that's going to affect your water, your availability to get water, you throw this in the bathtub. You screw it onto the spigot. You fill up 100 gallons of pure water. And then it has a way of siphoning it out. So you can have, just from your bathtub, 100 gallons of pure water sitting in storage. And this is just a matter of having a box with a piece of plastic in it.
Really, this is just a regular water filter.
It's not even a filter.
Oh.
Yeah, you're getting clean water out of your bathtub just like you would if you.
What if
had
you,
it.
yeah, but that's assuming you know something's going to happen before it happens. What's
Right.
going to happen?
Well, if it's already happened, there
gotta-
are filtration
right.
systems, right. The other thing is to be prepared in advance. So for that, we have rain barrels. You can get these olive
Right.
barrels that have been used for making olives or pickles. They discard them afterwards. You can get them. They're 55-gallon barrels. People use them as rain barrels. You can connect it to your downspout. Whenever it rains, you can fill these up with water.
Now, these barrels, do they have that problem with that BPA? You know, the...
Well, these are food grade because they're made for you make
I mean,
food
the
out of them.
food-grade barrels have been identified having BPA problems, which means, I guess in an emergency you don't care, but...
Yeah, that's what I guess. If you're
Yeah.
you need it for water, I wouldn't be worrying about
Right, right.
the little pollutants. I'd be worrying about survival.
Okay.
Shelter, right? Having some sort of making sure you have, everybody knows what these are. These are survival blankets. These things that look like little mirrors,
Right.
just to keep you warm. Having some sort of rain suit, two-piece rain suit or a poncho. Having a tent.
Are they hermetically sealed?
No, but good. They're good enough.
They're good enough.
Having a way of making fire.
Yeah.
Right. This is called Swedish steel. You just scrape it, and it's like
Gives a
flint.
spark,
It
right.
sparks. You can use magnesium.
Sure.
They're all different ways of making fire. And then food, right? We discussed having food storage. Food storage is probably a whole topic in itself. There are many long-term foods out there that you can store. Probably the most expert at this would be the LDS Church, the Mormons. They have, as part of their faith, they actually store a year's worth of food. I was always wondering whether Mitt Romney has his year's worth of
I'm sure
storage.
he does. He's a
If
pretty
he has already
devout-
planned in the White House to have his year's worth of storage over there.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, they have these canneries that are all over the country, and most of them are open to non-church members. You can go in and you can get things that are long-term foods like wheat and beans and rice, and you can can them on the spot. This is from their cannery, and it's just pure wheat. And you take this wheat, you can open. This will last 30+ years. In fact, they found.
I mean, not the can of wheat will last 30. I mean, sealed it'll last 30 years.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And as long as it doesn't get wet and damaged in some way, I mean, it'll last you for your lifetime, basically. And
Right.
they found wheat actually in the pyramids that they were able to sprout, and this is after thousands of years that it was still
Right.
able to sprout. So obviously, once you have the wheat, you need some sort of system in order to be able to grind it.
Right.
And I have a hand mill at home
Hand mill,
in order
yeah.
to grind it, and you have to know how to use it. There are other ready-made options. Everybody's probably familiar with ramen noodles. So, and by the way, all these products that I have here are kosher, just because as Orthodox Jews, it's required to have kosher food. So, in a survival situation, clearly you can do whatever you need in order to survive. But if you're already preparing in advance, there's no reason why not to do it the right way. Ramen noodles, everybody's familiar with it. Very cheap option to have. Cans, people think that you have to go buy a year's worth of food in advance. Every time you go to the store, if you just put an extra can away, you buy a can of beans and you put another one away, within a short amount of time, you're going to have your own food storage.
Right.
Some other things to think about, they have dehydrated foods that you can get. They're very cheap. You just basically open them up, you spill them into a pot with boiling water, and again, you're going to need the water, you're going to need a way of heating the water, but this allows you to make a whole meal in one package. Similar to what's used in the military, this is the MRE, or Meals Ready to Eat. This is the kosher version that's distributed by the military. It's an accessory pack, and you have main meals. You have here inside a heat pack.
Right.
And you open it up, you pour a little bit of water into it, it heats up, you put your meal in there, and you have a hot meal within minutes.
Right.
This is a sea ration, not the sea ration like they had in like the MREs, but this is something that's used at sea for lifeboats. It's like a cookie, I would say like a lemon cookie. It lasts for 5+ years minimum. This one has 2,400 calories in it. Some of them have 3,600 calories. It doesn't make you thirsty.
This whole thing is for one person?
Right, right. and it'll last a long time. This will keep you going. That's why, you know, if you're stuck in a lifeboat situation, then you want to make sure that you have enough food to keep you going. So this will last quite a long time.
When you say quite a long time, it's 2,400 calories. That's a day's worth of food.
Well, in a lifeboat situation.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So what would you do? You take maybe a little piece of this and then
right. You would be
put it away.
able to ration it. You definitely can ration it a lot more than you can water. You know, your body needs water a lot more than it does food. And depending on how much calories you're going through in the day. If you're sitting in a lifeboat, obviously you're not going through a lot of calories. If you're going to be working outside,
well, stress also burns off a lot of
stress.
calories.
You know, there's all sorts of things in a survival situation. Once you've gone beyond the basics, once you've gone beyond air and water and shelter and food, there are other aspects that should be dealt with. One is, and your expertise is communication, and we've had a whole show just dealing with emergency communications, whether it be ham. Some examples of what, you know, even without a license, everybody's familiar with these things, these little walkie-talkies. Of course, they don't go very far, but in an emergency situation,
it's something.
It's something. Likewise, you can have, here is a flashlights, having light, right?
Sure.
This is a wind-up flashlight, but I also have here a wind-up flashlight, which also is a radio. So, you know, if you want to be able to hear what's going on out there and...
Yeah, but does that store, or you have to constantly do that?
No, it actually stores it.
Okay, so you can do it for a while and then it'll stay on.
Yeah, it'll stay on. It has, not for very long. Some primitive communications, you want to make sure that you have a whistle, a compass, you know, some ways of getting around.
So, you know, if you have fillings in your teeth, you can actually put a little thin wire on there and you can actually hear radio.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a detector. I mean, the problem is it's not any selective detector, so whatever comes through, you'll hear at the time. And wherever's the strongest signal, you'll hear at the time. But the wire acts like a little antenna, and you connect it because of the difference in the materials concept. It actually generates an ability to synthesize the radio signal coming in, and you hear it. You know, because it's vibration, you hear it in your head.
And how do you tune it?
You don't. That's what I'm saying. There's no tuner. There's no selectivity. So you'll hear competing signals all the time, and the strongest one is what's going to
hearing voices in your head.
Yeah.
Huh.
But in a survival situation, you may grab something just to try to hear what's out there.
Right, right. You know, having a shovel, you know, that probably goes to shelter. No, the other thing I wanted to talk about is some other ideas are medicine.
That's a great idea.
People that have medicine, you know, medical issues from before a survival situation. So you need to be prepared for this.
Sure.
If a person is diabetic,
Or thyroid.
or whatever it is, you want to make sure you have insulin in case of an emergency. I mean, you can't wait. If, God forbid, there's an emergency which the electrical grid goes down, people don't realize that, you know, it's nice to have a generator, a backup generator, but you need to have fuel to fuel that generator. And your car, it's nice to have a car that you'll be able to go somewhere, but you need fuel to run that car. Most gas stations, people are unaware, the modern day pumps, not like the olden days, the modern day pumps are all electronic.
Sure.
So as soon as the electricity goes down, most gas stations don't have backup generators. So as soon as the electricity goes down, there goes the
Well, you'd have to siphon it out somewhere, siphon the gas out. I don't know how to do that.
I don't know how to do that either. I mean, it's deep in the ground, and I'm not sure anybody has...
But by the way, the reality of the electric grid going down is probably more a possibility than even a nuclear blast or something, because of the ability now, especially Iran has that ability to send an EMP pulse over in some sort of nuclear-capable bomb, which will actually just be in the upper atmosphere and just go poof, and then it'll send an EMP pulse down in a wide area. I'm not sure how big the area would be. They would fry every kind of basically transistor or solid-state equipment, which is just about everything today, except my radio. But the point is that that's a serious issue. That's more real an issue because they're even talking about it. I mean, you know, and threatening with it, and more threatening than they are with nuclear. So that is a good point.
Well, when I speak about preparedness, I like telling people that you need to be prepared in a very broad way.
Correct.
Speaking about specific scenarios, there's no way of us knowing what's going to happen.
No, but there is certain things have more more higher probabilities than other situations.
Right. But my point is that if you have the basics, whether it be food, water, medicine, then you're prepared for everything. You know, if you're just prepared for nuclear fallout and you have a room full of potassium iodide pills, that's great. But what happens when there's a flood? I mean, you're stuck.
Yeah, I would not advocate. I'm just saying there are some things that are more likely.
But regardless, medicines, whether you have a pre-existing condition or not, when we have something, I have a large family, when we have the necessity to have antibiotics and we have extra ones sitting around, we vacuum seal it and we keep those. And it's interesting, there's actually a study that was done by the military, and it's called SLEP, S-L-E-P, which is Shelf Life Extension Program. And you can look it up. It's actually a classified program, so we don't know the results of what they did. That was an agreement they did with the FDA. You know,
Right.
At one point, the military figured, you know what? We're spending millions and millions of dollars every year
Right.
on replenishing all the medicines that we have. All these medications have expiration dates, and as soon as the expiration date goes, we throw it out and we buy new ones.
Right.
It's probably it'll last longer than what the expiration date is. So the military, they went to the FDA and they said, can you tell us what the actual expiration, not what the pharmaceutical companies are saying, but what are the actual expiration dates? And they said, you know, as long as you keep it classified,
Right.
we'll give you that data. And some of that leaked out. And amongst them, they realized that dry antibiotics like Cipro will last for many, many years, maybe decades after its expiration date. So again, I'm not a doctor. I'm not recommending
No, I
that.
wouldn't advocate
But in an
it,
emergency
right.
situation,
Do what you have to.
having some extra medications there are important. This is called Quick Clot. Quick Clot is an amazing product which has saved many of our soldiers' lives in Iraq and Afghanistan. Basically, in the olden days, somebody would have a major artery severed. You would have to take a tourniquet and try to stop that. Often they would lose the limb that was
Right.
below the part of the tourniquet, possibly losing their lives as well. And there are many places you can't put a tourniquet. Obviously, if a person is wounded in their neck, you can't put a tourniquet around their neck. This new gauze, they make it in two forms. One is a powder form. The other is a gauze form. It has a chemical in it, embedded in it, and when you pack it into the wound, it actually clots it. You can look it up on YouTube. It's amazing. They take actually a pig, they sever an artery, it's blood spilling out. I wouldn't recommend it if you're shy of blood, but they put this stuff in, and within a minute, it's completely clotted. Right. So this is an amazing product to have, in case. And then everybody, there's no one out there that has an excuse why they shouldn't have basic first aid knowledge.
Sure.
Taking CPR, everybody should take a CPR course. It's not that difficult. In fact, today they're not even talking about breaths anymore. They're just talking about compressions. Right. You don't have to be afraid to put your mouth on somebody. You don't know what kind of disease they have. You see somebody collapse. They don't have a pulse. They're not breathing. Just start compressing on their chest, in the middle of their chest. You're going to save a life. I mean, having that basic. But you can go beyond that. You can go take first aid courses all over the place, EMT courses. Knowing how to use an airway, for example. I mean, this is obviously advanced, but an airway and an ambu bag. Again, I just want to point out that in a survival scenario where you wouldn't have electricity, you can't really manually ventilate somebody for that long. I mean, you could sit there with a bag going like this, but that's only temporary. Right. And it's always scared me that in a hospital situation, the hospitals have backup generators, of course. But those generators are only prepared to last for a few days, a week. I don't know how long they last for. But what happens if, God forbid, the disaster is longer than that? What do they do? Because at that point, you have all these patients they're completely dependent on ventilators or other machinery, other technology. And without that, they're not going to survive. So it's a pretty scary scenario. I've always recommended to everybody a book. It's called 1 Second After. You mentioned an EMP attack, which is an electrical magnetic pulse. 1 Second After is a book that was written. It's fictional, but it's based on real facts. Newt Gingrich actually wrote the preface for it. He did a study in Congress, which is shocking. The study in Congress showed that if there was an EMP attack, a national EMP attack against the United States, within 1 year, we would lose 80% of the population. I mean, that's staggering. I mean, imagine 80% of our population would be destroyed, would be wiped out if there was a nationwide EMP attack. Now, just to go, what is an EMP? An EMP, basically, when you have asymmetrical warfare, and you have a country like North Korea that has nuclear capabilities but is not going to go head-to-head with the United States because they don't have a chance. So they may have the ability to shoot a nuclear device into the atmosphere, above the atmosphere, explode it above the atmosphere, and like you said, it'll basically fry, right? It won't, it's not going to be fallout. Nobody's going to feel it.
Correct.
But it'll fry all the sensitive
solid state, primarily electronics, which
electronics
is in your car,
on the ground,
which is in your electric generating plants, which is basically controlling everything today. So.
That's right. That's right. Well, we're talking about everything from your watches to
Well, I
obviously.
don't know about watches. There are some watches, unless they're electronic watches. There are some the old. Well, there's a lot of those still around.
Right, and you mentioned yourself that your communication scenario. I mean, you have a rig that is working on tubes, not on.
Correct. That would survive an EMP attack because the tube itself just has metal parts in it, but it's in a vacuum, and so an EMP would have no effect on it. Now the thing is, it does require though more power to operate than a solid state. So you want to be sure if you're using electronic devices that are tubes, you know you have a higher current need. You need to prepare for that by having a proper generator that's going to be able to supply that kind of power.
But a place like PCTV, which is run off of on all modern technology. This place would be fried, right? All the TV stations, all the radio stations would have difficult. They're not running on the old
They'd be primarily fried. Well, most of them have backup generators. I know for a fact.
Well, generator's not going to help in this case because if the electronics are fried.
Oh, that's right. You're right. That's right.
Generator's not going to help.
Yeah, that's right.
So
I don't know how many tube backups they have. Probably not.
Probably not. So I mean, it's definitely going to be rough.
Smart ones do. But
so we're hoping we're not looking for such a disaster scenario as an EMP necessarily, but there.
Just a side comment. WEDO is still using the old boards and still has a 1942 transmitter that they use, and it's still operating. So they'll probably still be around.
That's impressive.
Yeah, that is one. I just thought about that.
Well, that's why having a backup radio is never a bad idea.
Right.
There's always going to be somebody transmitting out there.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting story. We mentioned it in a previous show that during 9/11, I don't know if you know this story. During 9/11, when the plane hit the Pentagon, it knocked out all communications in the Pentagon. And there was no communications between, this is scary, there was no communications, obviously they fixed it since. There were no communications between the Pentagon and the White House except for an amateur radio operator that was in the Pentagon and an amateur radio operator that was in the White House that were communicating back and forth for the first almost 20 minutes. There was no communication. So the ham radio operators were actually running the country at that time, or keeping us afloat. So it's definitely important.
In most disasters, I'll just give a quick plug for this. In most disasters, the amateur radio operators far exceed the normal salaried civil service emergency communications workers. They do because they love it and they're into it and they set up their situations to make sure that they do prepare. They make sure they're ready to go if things like that happen. So. And by the way, that's a side comment. That's why it's important for everybody, and it's easy to do, to learn the Morse code, even though it's not required anymore today. Morse code is a very primitive way to communicate, but because it's primitive, it gets through the noise, it gets through all the clutter, and it makes your message very specific. And plus, you have to talk very specific and in a compressed form. So your message is clear, it gets through the noise. It's very important. So I would recommend everybody to learn the Morse code. It's easy to do. Take maybe 5 letters a day, or sign up at your local amateur radio club, and they'll teach it to you. But it's important to know in an emergency.
Right, and again, becoming an amateur radio operator, getting licensed, you need a license for it. But it's not that difficult to get licensed. I thought
there's a gentleman that if you contact the Salvation Army, there's a gentleman that will get you licensed within a week if you go to his classes, and they're free.
Is that Joe?
Yeah, and he actually has a compressed class he does all day for 2 days, 16 hours worth of training, and he gives you the test at the end by his volunteer examiners. If you pass that test, you have your amateur radio license, and then you first have to learn. But you take that information and you can go forth and do what you need to do. You can have as simple as an appliance like a handheld radio, or you can have something as detailed as a solid amateur radio station. But especially to be prepared for these things, amateur radio is one of the greatest ways to do it, and the community of amateur radio operators are very, very dedicated toward emergency communications. In fact, that's one of the main building blocks of amateur radio is the amateur radio civil emergency, or the radio amateur civil emergency service and the amateur radio emergency service. Both of these operate in different ways. One operates with the civil defense control, and one operates specifically within the amateur community. So it's a great thing to be a part of. In fact, once a year we have a program called Field Day. We take the radios out in the field and with generators, independent of the electric mains, and we have a contest for 2 days straight where amateur radio operators try to contact as many other operators with a certain type of exchange. And the key is to teach radio operators to operate in the field. And should, God forbid, emergency happen, they're ready to go.
I wanted to quickly just mention two other aspects. I mean, there are so many aspects of preparedness. And once you start learning about it, and you just do a Google of prepper, you're going to get, and people are becoming more familiar with it because of the 2012, although very few preppers actually believe that the world's ending, at the end of the Mayan calendar, if that is the end of the Mayan calendar.
I think they already found a calendar.
Right. But I mean, it's like Y2K. I mean,
I'll tell you, well, you talk about that, but I'll just say that the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which is obviously a recognized scientific agency of the U.S. government, has said that the ozone layer has a tear, and that in December, that tear, they even pinpointed the date, December 20th something, I think 22nd, something like that. That tear is supposed to be exacerbated. If it does, that means the harmful rays of the sun will get through, and there will be some mass fires. There will be some serious issues.
Right.
We don't know where that's going to be. So that's real. I mean, that's not the Mayan calendar. That's this year's NOAA prognostications about what's going to happen. So.
That's right, and they suggest there may be another Carrington event, and it is scary. I mean, definitely you have to do your research. Again, I don't know if that's going to happen or what's going to happen, but being prepared is not a big deal. So that it's easy to do. Right. People are welcome to contact the show, and our email is going to be put up after the show. People are welcome to go online. There is so much information out there with YouTube and the internet. It's so easy to prepare today. There's really no excuse for everyone to go out immediately and start preparing. Even if it's just a matter, even if you don't have any money to buy stuff, learning skills is just as important as having the materials. So going out there and learning how to survive is just as important. I wanted to mention two other aspects. One is security. Clearly, if you have all the food and water and everything in the world, and there's a disaster scenario, and God forbid, there's something like a Katrina situation, there's looting, you have to make sure.
The first thing to go is the rule of law. People follow the law now because there's a system in place, but when the system goes away, there's other things that have to come into play.
Right, and that's what, when people discuss, in the prepper community, they discuss a disaster scenario, they speak about ROL, without rule of law, right. WROL situation. And we're very fortunate in our country to have a Constitution and a Second Amendment which allows us to be armed. I recommend, as a person who is accredited, I'm somebody who's a certified firearms instructor. I believe in owning firearms and knowing how to use them. I believe that everybody has an obligation to go out there and to learn how to use firearms. I'd recommend, again, people are welcome to contact me for classes or contact their local gun club. But it's not only guns. I mean, having a security plan in place is basic as having smoke alarms, as basic as having if you have a family, knowing where you're going to meet up if you're all somehow lost. I mean, having it starts off in such a basic level that everybody should have, and unfortunately very few people do have.
Right, and everybody expects everybody to be as nice as they are. The problem is when everything breaks down and somebody realizes it's either their life or they have to go take something from somebody else to survive, they're going to do what they have to do to survive. The survival instinct is the base instinct. That's going to kick in. So people have to be ready for that and have to be ready to protect their family. And
cities are actually probably urban environments. They're probably the scariest of all.
Correct.
Because urban environments, people don't realize we're so dependent.
Unnatural. It's actually unnatural.
It is. It's a world made out of stone, and we don't have. It's not like in the olden days where in nature where we have gardens and we have. In fact, 50 years ago people had chickens. We spoke about it in a former show. People had chickens. It was natural to have victory gardens. Today, very few people know how to sustain themselves without going to the grocery store.
It's all interdependence.
Right, and what's scarier is that when you go to the grocery store, people don't realize that it's not like in the olden days where people would have stock, the grocery stores would have stocks of food in the back.
Right.
Today, it's all dependent. There's a system where when you pull something off the shelf and you buy it,
they
reorder it immediately or within the 24 hours, and it's brought to them on a truck. So if that transportation is broken and those trucks stop flowing,
that's right.
Right, the city is going to be a death trap. I mean, that's just the reality. And if you look historically, this is not something we're just making up or theorizing. Historically, that is the way it was. I mean, if you look at disasters or the collapse of the Soviet Union, and people cannot survive very long in the major cities, and they start to spread out into the countryside because they assume that's where the farms are, that's where the food is. And again, it's something that you have to research and be prepared for. The other things are, and there's so many aspects. Another aspect people don't think about, but it's a real aspect, is waste. You know, you're stuck in your house for an extended period of time, and you have your food, you have your water, you know, you're able to live. People go to the bathroom. You know, what do you do when you go to the bathroom? How do you go to the bathroom? How do you dispose of that waste?
You're talking about when the plumbing is down.
Well, again, everything is interdependent. So if you don't have electricity, you're not going to have the sewage at some point is going to go out. Your water is going to go out. Your sewage, it all works off of electricity. But one of the ideas for that is this. You know, preppers love 5-gallon buckets. We use this for everything. Having this. It's a little toilet lid. Goes on top of a 5 bucket. You put a bag inside, and you're able to use that as a toilet. And then afterwards, after you've done your business there is actually these are enzymes. You actually just spill them, and they have these people that have RVs or airplanes or RVs.
On ships also.
You just spill that it totally destroys the waste and the solid waste. And that's another thing. I mean, understanding. We don't want to get too graphic here, but understanding that it's open to the public here. We're not rated R here. So, but you know, getting into what the difference between solid waste and liquid waste and how to dispose of both of them. These are things that people have to think about. You were on a ship for years. I mean, you probably know that's
we had these things called CHT, chemical holding tanks.
Okay.
Where they would do basically the same thing on a huge scale.
Right, which is also what they have in a small scale in RVs. I mean, that's just
correct.
But knowing how to dig an outhouse in the back of your house or wherever it is, something that was obviously known 100 years ago, but nobody knows how to do today. The basic fundamentals of survival were so understood. Clearly, when people think about history. Let's talk about this a little bit. In 1492, they discovered America. They came over here, and the pilgrims, whoever it was that first came to this country, they came to a barren land. Well, barren in the fact that there was nobody there besides the indigenous population, and they had to build with whatever they had. They had to build everything. It's not like they can run to Home Depot, Home Depot or Lowe's. Buy some wood. They had to chop the trees, and they had babies. They had children. They had literally, you can imagine them getting off a boat, and they had to build their whole lives out of whatever they found in nature, and they were prepared to do that. That's how they survived. Today, how many of us can say that we can just get off of a boat, walk out into the middle of a field, and create a new life? I mean, Robinson Crusoe.
You can go places to learn this and to live it and to figure it out. But most people don't do that, and they don't think they have to. Because in reality, they probably don't, because hopefully the one thing we talk about is a remote thing that's going to happen, but when it does happen, and like I say, the natural disaster stuff does happen. It happens all the time.
Natural and man-made disasters. And we learned from, I think people have come to realize after 9/11 how insecure we are. And how vulnerable we are to attack. And there's no reason why we can't be prepared on all different levels. But like you said, natural disasters. Here in Pittsburgh, we're not so susceptible to natural disasters as they are in other regions of our country. But we have experienced recently hurricanes, earthquake, tornado,
Mount Washington,
floods. People killed from floods. Just now, imagine in Washington D.C. The center of our country, our capital, is out without electricity for a week. Imagine that.
That was payback.
I mean, whatever you want to call it, but the fact is that imagine in America, the greatest country in the world, the center of the greatest country in the world cannot have electricity for a whole week. People, it's 100 degrees sweltering weather, and people were without air conditioning. People were without the basic necessities of life. And you can see already
there was start to break down. There was fights over water. There was mob scenes in certain areas. So you can see on a small scale that lawlessness was already creeping in, and that's
and within a couple of years ago, we had Snowmageddon here in Pittsburgh. I mean, these things happen. They happen all the time to everyone, and there's no reason why if you're going to wait until it happens, it's too late. It's as simple as that. So
but they see the urgency. The people don't see. Well, if I don't do it today, I'll get around to it tomorrow. But it's not going to happen tomorrow. and probably won't. But you know, the one time that it happens, you're gonna say, "I wish I would have done it."
Right,
So,
and like you said, by that time it's too late. So getting these things in you know, just getting the process moving.
and doing it slowly. I mean, you can do it slowly. Like it's like paying off a loan over time. You know, it doesn't feel as bad as trying to pay $40,000 at a clip. If you do it a very little over time, you might not even notice it. And pretty soon you have a storehouse, you have communications, you have your weapons, you have everything you need, and then you're fine. You go on through life and go back to doing your thing, and then God forbid nothing's going to happen. But if it does happen, then you're ready.
I have to mention another big aspect of preparedness, and that is networking. And this is something you don't need finances for, you don't need skills even for. The ability to network now, it's very easy to network now with other like-minded people, people that are also concerned about preparedness. And in a disaster scenario, it's really important. I would say it's maybe the most important thing out there is to have a network of people that you can rely on, that you can depend on. And people that are prepared or skilled and you know, have expertise in different aspects of preparedness. Having that network now is so easy. It's so easy to get involved. You know, go on the internet, look on Meetup, look on you know, whatever the different places you look on the internet. Finding local groups. There are local groups, whether it be the LDS Church or whether it be the Red Cross, you know, a government agency, or the local zombie squad, if people are familiar with what that is. All these different groups have the same sort of concept of learning survival skills, being prepared. It's so easy to do right now. It is not going to be easy if something happens. So be prepared now. I mean, right now, everybody can go on their computers. They can Google preparedness, prepper. They can find out, you know, where their local groups are and start building a network, a local network. And you might have, you'd be surprised. There are people out there. I mean, I'm surprised, and you know, I live this. But I find people every day in my neighborhood. You know, I start chatting, and people may not even be familiar with the terminology of, you know, prepper. People instinctively, I'm learning more and more every day that people instinctively are realizing that it's necessary to have some sort of. And I want to say something else. I mentioned the fall of the Soviet Union and how people, you know, were you know, moving out into the countryside. And the Soviet Union, the former Soviet Union, was a lot more prepared than we are. And that's because they were a lot less dependent on technology. We are so dependent on our cell phones, so dependent on going to the pharmacy, picking up our medications. We're so dependent on having our car working and our air conditioning working. We're so dependent on that a collapse in the United States would be so much worse than you know, if there was a collapse and somebody lived on a farm in the middle of the Soviet Union, the former Soviet Union.
And by the way, I don't know if you ever noticed, when I was growing up, and I don't even see it anymore, you used to see fallout shelter signs all over the place. And where I live now, down the street, used to be a fallout shelter, and probably still is, except the sign's gone. And nobody knows about fallout shelters.
Well, in the height of the Cold War, I mean, people practiced in school, you know, getting under their desks. I'm not sure what that did, but it gave you at least
a mindset.
A mindset, exactly, to understand that you need to be prepared for something. There's something out there that is menacing, and whatever you can do, whether it be skills or materials to prepare. I'm not telling people that they should go out and build fallout shelters in their backyards, but having basic materials is so simple today. And networking and learning skills is so simple today that there's really no excuse for everyone not to do that.
And speaking of networking, can I give a call sign for more information if they want an amateur radio?
Absolutely.
If anybody does want information on how to get involved in amateur radio, which has been a great part of my life since I was 15 years old, they can email me at my call sign, which is WA2, F as in Frank, F as in Frank, Y as in Yankee, WA2, FFY, at AMSAT, AMSAT, that's like amateur satellite, AMSAT.org, WA2FFY at AMSAT.org. I can put you in contact with a number of people that can do all kinds of things besides training you, helping you. A lot of this is for free, and showing you, once you get licensed, where to get the best equipment and so forth, and how to get started. It's a very rewarding hobby, besides being an incredible emergency communications ability. It's something you'll take with you as old as you get. You can get out of it. You play golf, at some point you're not going to be able to do it. You play football, at some point you're not going to be able to do it. But amateur radio you can take with you as long as your brain works. And you know, God forbid, you should never need it in a real emergency situation, but as much as you want to get involved in emergency communications, you can do it in amateur radio. And there are people, speaking of networking, that'll help you and work with you and to get you up to speed. So I highly recommend it.
Yeah, my call sign is KB3VPY. And again, it's easy to do. There's no excuse not to do it. Right. I was speaking about the Mormon Church. I was speaking a little bit about the LDS Church. Here in Pittsburgh, we don't have a cannery, but not so far north of us in Ohio. It's in Brecksville, Ohio. You can say that I sent you. I mean, they know me there. You can go there and you can get these bulk items of foods that are long-term, long shelf life. And you can get it very, very cheap. You can can it right there. You can have it in storage. And it'll last you your lifetime. I mean, it is something that you can store and put aside and you don't have to worry about it. And I'm not trying to sell anything here. You know, I'm not trying to sell some sort of product. They're all good. You just need to have some sort of plan now, I wanted to mention also the federal government, the state government, the county, they have also materials you can order for free from FEMA, materials, and you can look online. And they have different booklets that they print. One is, I know, called Are You Prepared? They have other booklets that explain how to be prepared. They have websites that explain how to prepare. Now, one of the interesting aspects that I've just recently started discussing with people are the difference between the unorganized, I'm going to call them, or organized, prepper community and the government. And I think one of the main differences, and sometimes they don't always see eye to eye, and one of the main differences, I think, is that the government on all its levels is assuming that there's going to be a very short-term disaster and then they're going to be able to come in and handle it. You know, within hours, days, weeks, whatever it is, they're going to be able to come in, take over the scenario. And the prepper community is a little bit suspect. And then they said, you know, we're not looking at a short-term disaster. We don't want to give, again, we don't, as we said in the beginning, we don't want to delegate our survival to any other group, any other person. We want to take our personal responsibility of our family's survival in our own hands and make sure that we can survive no matter what. And in order to do that, you have to conceive of a scenario where there isn't a rule of law and that the government is not available to you know. And Katrina is a great example. You know, Katrina, it took a long time. I don't remember what it was, weeks, months before they got that under.
Well, the problem with that is that wasn't it wasn't so much a government problem, federal government problem, as it was a state government. It was a state issue. It's a state disaster. It was a state problem. They needed federal help. They could get it, but the problem was the state was not prepared, and the state didn't respond, and the state wasn't there, and then they just went, federal government, you know, can you help us? And that's not the way it's supposed to work. In states that are prepared with the proper administration and control, they could have handled most of that. And if they needed, you know, to declare a disaster or to get federal funds, they could have done that. But they had the materials to do it themselves, and they just didn't want to do it. So, and they weren't prepared to do it, so they just held up their hands and said, "Federal government, take care of it for us." And that's technically not the way it's supposed to work. But the federal government came in and they weren't really prepared because it's a state issue and the states knew more about what was going on than they did. So, and you can see in the state that Haley Barbour was in, Mississippi, took care of their people real well. I mean, they had no trouble. But in Louisiana, they had no infrastructure there. They had nothing, and they just couldn't do it. So, and then the federal government had to come in and take it over. So.
But it is a great way of us seeing what could happen. Whoever you're going to put, you know, play the blame game, and you're going to say this person or that person was responsible. In the end, there was a failure on someone's behalf, and that created, you know, for the people that were people that were stuck in Katrina. It doesn't really matter if it was a state failure or if it was a federal failure.
Right.
Their lives were in danger. So for those people, I mean, the prepper community wants to see beyond the any government agency coming in and saving them.
Especially since the first thing they do when they win is take everybody's guns, which really exposed them to the lawlessness that was going on, rather than helping to protect them.
And a lot of the law enforcement sort of just went,
They
you know,
went
ran
away,
away.
too.
I mean,
They
no,
ran
not necessarily
away.
ran away. It wasn't, I'm not, they had their own families to protect them. And
Right,
they were
right.
also, you know, stuck in the disaster scenario.
Exactly.
So, so the law enforcement, people don't realize that law enforcement has no obligation
That's right.
to come and you know, you pick up, assuming you have the ability to call 911.
Right.
They don't have an obligation
That's
to
correct.
come and
They
even
can, they can.
and even if they can, you know, there's no guarantee. Even today, you know, on a normal day without a disaster scenario, you pick up the phone and call 911. There's no guarantee that
correct.
you know, law enforcement's going to show up there in a certain amount of time. They might be there in 10 minutes, 20 minutes, a half an hour, an hour. I mean, you have no. So, you know, if you're in the middle of a home invasion, you can't wait an hour for them to show up.
Correct.
You have to know how to prepare
Prepare yourself, right.
protect your family.
And that's kind of like a mini disaster, and you need to be ready for that. There's a very good book on that called Dial 911 and Die. Richard Benson, I think was the guy who wrote it. It's available through jpfo.org and other places, I'm sure. But it's a good book to read. It gives you that idea that, and you're right, illegally they don't have to respond. And you should know what you have to do. Don't rely on them. Call them first before you do anything. Even in a medical emergency, whatever the emergency is, call 911, but be ready yourself to take command of the situation and do what you have to do.
Right. So that's the, you know, that's on a normal everyday you want to make sure that you are able to survive. But in a disaster scenario, obviously that's exacerbated, you know, 1,000 times. And you have a scenario where the police, even if they wanted to help and they were able, you know, they just don't have the resources to be able to take care of everybody. Even, you know, Snowmageddon we mentioned.
Right.
They didn't have the vehicles that could transport people to the hospital. They had to bring in
Sure.
the National Guard and their Humvees in order to transport people. But again, and that was a very short-lived disaster. Imagine a much longer scenario.
Sure.
It's scary to think about. It's not pleasant, but we all have to think about it. What can we do to prepare ourselves, our families, our communities for a disaster?
Exactly.
You know, we only have a few minutes left. I think we should take this opportunity to, first of all, thank my guest, Andy Delin. You know, I appreciate coming in and bouncing some ideas off you. This was a general topic, general preparedness. There's so much to speak about. Every aspect of what we discussed is something that we could go on, have an entire show, an entire series about. I mean, if you want to talk about how to prepare as far as shelter or food or water, these kind of things are something that you can go on and on about, and there's so much to discuss. There's so many skills to learn. There's really, as I've already said many times, there's no excuse why everyone out there, anyone who's watching this show, should not go immediately onto the internet, Google something, preparedness, emergency preparedness, prepper, and start to learn. Go to YouTube. There are so many YouTube channels out there that are specifically geared to teach skills of preparedness. It's so easy. I don't say that you definitely take some things with a grain of salt. Make sure that you verify things, fact check them, because not everybody out there is going to be an expert. There are a lot of people out there that don't know what they're talking about. But make sure that you learn from skilled people, experts that know what they're saying, and start getting those skills. At the same time, when you go out shopping, there's no reason why you can't pick up some extra food and have it stored. Make sure that you have a water backup, some energy backup, having shelter, having a plan. You know, just as basic of sitting down with your family with some sort of piece of paper saying, you know, this is our plan in an emergency scenario. If there is a fire, if there's a flood, some kids are going to be in school, some of them are going to be on a trip, some of them are going to be at home. Where are we going to meet? How are we going to communicate? How are we going to find each other? What are we going to do? What is plan B? What are we going to do next? Having that backup plan is so easy, and it's just as important as any. You know, everybody has insurance. Everybody has insurance on their cars, on their houses, on their lives. Why not? What's more important than your survival and your family's survival? You need to go out and have a plan in place.
And then practice the plan.
And practice plan, of course. I mean, that's another problem. You'll find on the internet all these people that are speaking all the time about how you should do this and how you should do that. How many people have actually practiced that plan with themselves, their families, their communities?
You'll have to know. Right?
And know how to, because you have to do things over and over. This is something you learn in the military. I mean, you have to do something over and over and over again until it becomes second nature and instinctive.
Yeah.
So it's something that you have to plan. It's something that you have to prepare. It's something that you have to go over many, many times in order to have it just be instinctive. That's something, because your mind's so foggy. When something happens, we speak about it when you talk about weapons training. When, there's so much adrenaline. There's a famous story. There was a police officer who was a crack shot. He was hitting bullseyes every single time he shot. And then, the first time he was in an actual scenario where he had to shoot at somebody, he shot his whole magazine off, dead center. And the guy ran away, and he couldn't understand, how is it possible this guy, he shot,
Right.
15 bullets at his chest. How is it possible he's running away? They caught the guy afterwards, and he hit him once in the toe.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a person that's a crime because there's so much adrenaline
Right.
that you just, your whole thinking is fogged, fogged at the time, and it's really hard to concentrate. It's really hard to know what to do unless you've practiced it so much that it
Sure.
becomes instinctive. It's something that we all have to do. I mean, and I'm speaking to ourselves just as much as the audience out there, that it's something that we have to go over. And as a community, we have an obligation. You have a church, you have a synagogue, you have some sort of community organization. You have your government officials, your local government officials. You have this has to be brought up. This has to be brought onto the agenda of your city council, your local city managers. It has to be on every level of government, whether it be local, whether it be county, whether it be state or federal. We have to pressure our government officials to take this. What could be more important? We can't wait until a disaster happens to be prepared. We have to take it onto our hands. We have to make sure that it's on the public's agenda, both that the government should be prepared, as well as being able to educate the public as to how to be prepared. Most people don't know what it means to have a 72-hour bag, to have a bag, a bug-out bag, in the prepper community we call it, to have something prepared, ready. If we have to get out of there, you can't start looking around for what you're going to put in there. You need to have it already packed. My wife, when she had to go to the hospital, we had a baby, the doctor says, for weeks before, you have to have a bag planned, packed, ready to go. If you have to be rushed to the hospital, you're in labor, you don't have time to start looking for things.
Right.
Have it ready. So everybody should have a bag ready, with these essential items for survival in case they are, God forbid, stuck in such a scenario.
Well, the thing is, if you take your time and you prepare and you think about it, and then you think about it again, and then you plan, and you say, oh, I forgot this or I forgot that, and you just do it, a low-stress situation, do it over time, and then when, God forbid, you need it, it's not just the stuff you need, it's even more so, because you've planned. You've got more, all the things you thought about later on, you brought in, it's there. And that's I think, the critical thing. If you're in stress, like you say, the guy shooting, the same thing when you're packing. If you're in stress, you're going to forget. You're going to forget sometimes critical stuff that you're going to need, and it's going to be too late. The house is going to blow up, and you're going to be out of the house, and that'll be it. You can't go back. So that's the importance of preparing ahead. One of them.
Well, I thank you for joining us today. I thank our guests, and I appreciate it. Please, we have our series going on now. We're going to be playing we're going to go into detail about all the aspects we've discussed. So I would appreciate it if everybody comes back to our show. Make sure to watch each aspect and learn from us, but don't wait for us. Like I said, right now, go onto the internet, start researching these things. You can never learn enough about it. And you'll find out as soon as you start researching it that there is a lot to learn. Again, thank you for coming to our show. If you want to contact me, it's prepperreport@gmail.com. My name is Josh Wander. I'm here with our guest, Andy DeLynn, and I appreciate you coming in and watching with us. Thank you.